Wednesday show. Wednesday show. Wednesday show. Wednesday show. It is time you're in the know. Because we'll talk. For those people who are just joining us for the first time, this is not how. It's not a musical episode. I know I'm a terrible singer. So just join in. We're going to talk all about Disney. I sing to kill time until the other people start showing up. Hello, everybody. How's everyone doing today? Are you guys doing good? Hopefully, everyone's doing well. Tonight, we're going to be talking all about Disney. Shocker. We're doing something new today. Talking about Yo Ho Up Ho. Yo Ho Up Ho. Okay. Never heard that greeting before, but I'll take it. Uh, So tonight we're gonna be talking all about Disney for the first time ever, or 709th time ever. Can't really remember. You know what? Let me write down 709 so I don't forget that is the episode that we're gonna be on tonight. Um, but how's everyone doing? Are you guys doing well? Hopefully everyone's doing well. We're gonna give people a few minutes here to get logged on. Hello, hello, and welcome back. Thank you. Although I do miss my nieces and my nephew a lot. I had so much fun with them. I I also want to apologize. Hey, hey, hey. Because I had a few people who wrote to me about me leaving without saying anything. Because usually when I'm going away to like visit my family, usually I give people a heads up, saying things like, "Hey, just giving you a heads up, we're not going to be having any Disney posts over the next few weeks, or the next few days, or whatever, however long it is." And this time around, I couldn't because we were surprising my dad. It was his. It was a big number, so we I went up there to surprise him for his 70th birthday, and I did not want to give away the fact that it was a surprise. And I talked to, I go back and forth with which parent I talked to on the way to the parks every single day. So today I called my mom. Tomorrow I'll call my dad. My dad doesn't answer, then I'll call my mom. Sometimes they're just together, and then I'll talk to both of them together. But anyways, so I called my dad from Wisconsin. My mom knew about me coming up there. She actually picked me up at the airport, and I called him as if I was going to Magic Kingdom, and I was playing my Instagram page as if I was going to the parks as usual. And then I surprised him while I was on the phone with him. But I had a few people who were like, "Why didn't you tell us?" Well, because my dad follows me on Instagram and Facebook. So actually, I'm literally the only person my dad follows on Instagram. So if I posted anything on Instagram, I'm pretty sure he would have seen because he only logs onto Instagram to look at my stuff. So yeah, I apologize that we went through and I kind of, just dropped off the face of the planet there. But we are back at Disney. I had a great time up in Wisconsin over the last week. I really had a great time. And like I said, I really miss my nieces and nephew a whole lot. I had so much fun with them. Had such a good time with my family. But we are back to our daily Disney post, our daily Disney videos, our daily Disney everything. Actually, we still continue to have a daily Disney video and a daily Disney short every day while I was in Wisconsin too. So it was just Instagram that kind of fell by the wayside. So I apologize to those people who follow on Instagram exclusively. But hey, we're back. Okay, so did you get into the races? I did it. So I'm actually perfect for the Wine and Dine challenge, the 2-course challenge. Which for those of you guys who don't know, I'm not bragging about myself, but a perfect status means you've done the race every single year since the inaugural year. So I've done the 2-course challenge every year since the inaugural year. So a week beforehand, I get a guaranteed bib in. So on yesterday, I don't even know. Today's Wednesday. Yeah, we're doing the Wednesday show. So yesterday, aka Tuesday, when the other one went live, I just had to get the 5K because I was already into the 10K and a half through the other one. So yeah. Okay, we're gonna get this party started. We're gonna start the 709th episode of the Wednesday show with a really cool twist. Hopefully you guys like it. Hopefully I can pull it off. We'll see. I came up with this like an hour ago. I had a few ideas of what we're going to do tonight, and then I came up with this idea, and I really like this idea. So that's the idea that we are going with. All right, we're going to start the 709th episode of the Wednesday show in 5, 4, 3, 2. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 709th episode of the Wednesday Show. Today is March 22nd, 2023, and I'm your host, as always, Brent Dodge. Hello. Today, we're going to be doing a brand new segment all in honor of Disney's 100th anniversary, which is going to be going, well, it's technically going on right now, even though the anniversary doesn't hit until October. But we're gonna kind of explain what that is in just a few minutes. But of course, before we get to that, let's talk about our news for the week. So first off, thank you everyone who's been joining us for a Saturday in the Park. If you didn't already know, every single Saturday right over on my YouTube channel, we do a live broadcast from someplace found throughout the Walt Disney World Resort. We didn't do one this past week, but the week before we did come to you live from Beauty and the Beast live on stage. So make sure you join us every single Saturday on my YouTube channel at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. You never know where we're going to be, but I guarantee you we will always be coming to you live from someplace in a Walt Disney World or Disneyland if we're in Disneyland, or on the cruise if we're on a cruise. But this week will be Walt Disney World. So make sure you join us every single Saturday. Also, if you didn't already know, every single day over on my YouTube channel, we are releasing a brand new Disney video. So make sure you are watching those, giving them likes, comments, all the other fun stuff, sharing with the friends. And if you're not already subscribed, make sure you subscribe. We have not checked this for a while. And actually, because of the layout for tonight's episode, this is kind of a perfect episode to do this for. Now, if you guys were with us over the last few months, well, like last month, about a month ago, I said my goal is to hit 3,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel by my birthday. My birthday is in 2 days, and so far we've hit what? We're still 303 away. So the chance of that hitting us, or of us hitting that, is getting slim. But keep sending people over. As always, if tonight we go up in subscribers as we go through our episode here tonight, we will go into extra innings and continue going into overtime for at least half an hour. So make sure you join us or send people over that have not already subscribed to subscribe right now. And of course, as always, tonight's episode is sponsored by It's All About the Mouse Travel Jazz Hands. Make sure you stop by it'sallaboutthemousetravel.com for all of your Disney travel needs. All of their services are absolutely positively 100% free. So make sure you book with them for your next Disney vacation. Okay, so tonight we're going to be doing a brand new segment. And like I said, this literally just came to me. You took down Happily Ever After, you can get 300 subscribers. That's true. That is true. I did take down Happily Ever After. I've killed a lot of things throughout my years, and I'm not even a hunter. Just a murderer, apparently. Tonight, like I said, I had a few different ideas of what I was going to come up with for tonight's episode, because at one point I was like, oh, it'd be really fun to do like just a specific attraction episode, because we've done lots of those in the past, and I've always enjoyed doing those in the past as well. But then I was kind of like, you know what? It is the Disney 100-year anniversary, and we haven't really talked that much about it because we've kind of still been in the 50th anniversary for Walt Disney World. That's going to be ending next week, which is kind of crazy. I was walking around today looking at like the 50th sign on the castle, thinking it's insane that this will not be here pretty soon. And then walking through the Emporium and seeing all the 50th merchandise, and all I could think was, I still have so much to buy, but at the same time, maybe if I haven't bought it for the last 18 months, then maybe I don't need to buy it. I still need to buy it though. So then I started thinking about the 100th anniversary, and I was like, oh, it'd be really cool if we kind of went through the history of the Disney company. But at the same time, I figured, you know what? A lot of other people do things like that in chronological order. Let's do it differently. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this the same way that we do things like our bracket series. So I am looking for you guys out there. You guys are going to be throwing years out at me, and then we're going to be talking about those specific years. Some of the years are going to go into a lot more detail because there's a lot more that happened in different years, like obviously like 1955, 1971, 1953, so many different years that have had so many things happen. And then if you say things like 1924, there's like a few short cartoons, and that's about it. So we're going to be going into a lot of depth about some years, other years, not so much. So what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be going to you guys out there in the comments. It's like I'm hugging you. We're going to go to you guys in the comments. And what I want you to do is I want you to throw a year out there from 1923 until 2023. That's right now. and we will go through and do the history. Now, I will say it probably won't be the best for us to do 2023 right now, because as we go further and further into the future, we'll be getting closer and closer to other things as well. Now, I do have notes that I pulled up for different things, so I have a reminder about some of the stuff. Like there's some years that I'll be like, oh, I know exactly everything that happened. And there's other things that's gonna be like, oh, not so much. So we're gonna go into the comments and we're gonna go to what you guys throw out there. It's gonna be a first come, first serve. So the first number that I see pop up, that'll be the one we do. We'll go through a history and then we're gonna go back to you guys and try to go through another year as well. Makes sense? Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so right now we have 3 years that have popped up, and you know what we're going to do is we might as well just go through those 3 years right away, and then after we finish those 3 years, we will go. Actually, you know what we'll do? After we finish the first year, then we'll ask for what the next one is after. So right now, our first 3 years is 1928, 1962, 1963. Oh, and we also have 1976. Oh, 1976 is a good one. I also think it's funny because I'm pretty sure people are like, oh, they've got associations with some of these years. Okay, so let's start us off in 1928. Let's pull up our. I mean, obviously, we know the big one that happened in 1928. But before we get to the big thing that happened in November of 1928, we kind of have to go through the entire history of what happened leading up to that. Now, at this point, the Walt Disney Company, or the Disney Brothers Studio, cartoon companies, the Disney Brothers Cartoon Studios, had just been around for 5 years. It has slowly started to morph into the Walt Disney Studios, or the Walt Disney Productions at this point. And throughout the years, it kind of has gone through so many different name changes, and we're going to talk more about that in the future as well. But let's talk about the very start of the year. So at the very start of the year, we got our first devastating loss. And it's one of those losses that a lot of people have talked about throughout the years. Now, the very first big commercial success that the Disney company had was before 1928. It was Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, who is just so gosh darn lovable. Nope. I had a shirt with him on it yesterday. I was thinking I was still wearing it, but this is a Stormtrooper. So before 1928, we had Oswald entering into our lives, and he was in so many different cartoons, starting with Trolley Troubles and going through about 30 different cartoons. Some of them have still not even been seen by the public today. Actually, they were seen by the public, but they were never, restored. And so there's a lot of people today who have never seen a lot of his cartoons. I've seen almost all of them. I think I'm missing 7 that I've not seen so far, and most of those just have never been released to the public since their original release back in the early 1920s. So let's get this straight, because I was talking to someone not that long ago, and they were a little confused on this, and we just want to make sure everyone's on the same page. So Disney did not work for Universal. Not at all. Okay, so there was a contracting loophole. So the way the cartoons would work back in the 1920s, the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, and 1960s is if you had a cartoon before a movie, which was just a standard practice at that time, you would actually have it. So before the movie, you would have it. Let's just throw out a movie from 1927, The Jazz Singer. So The Jazz Singer, or was that 1928? It might have been 1928. So The Jazz Singer would have been released by a specific brand. It might have been MGM. I'm not positive. I think it might have been MGM. So you would have MGM Studios, and they would release The Jazz Singer. You know what? Let's go to the one that we actually know. Wizard of Oz. So Wizard of Oz, back in the 1930s, would have it would be the starring attraction. It would be the movie that everyone and anyone would go through and want to watch. That was what everyone was coming for. However, before you would actually get there, you would watch a cartoon beforehand. Now, the cartoon would not actually be released specifically by MGM. They would actually have an outside person that they would have a contract with to kind of go through. This is how the Walt Disney Brothers, aka Walt Disney and Roy Disney, would go through and have many of their cartoons released before different movies. So they didn't actually work for Universal Studios. They just had a contract with Universal Studios to have it so these different Oswald the Lucky Rabbit cartoons would be released under the Universal banner. So if you went to go see, the only movie I can think of by Universal right now is E.T. So if you went to go see E.T., you might have had Oswald the Lucky Rabbit beforehand. I know E.T. came out in 1982, but that's besides the point. Hopefully you're following along. So you would have E.T., and then before it, you would have a Oswald the Lucky Rabbit cartoon. So people would watch it, and that would be the contract. So with this contract, they had it so there was a loophole in the contract where they would actually own Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, and Walt was just doing the animation, he was doing the creation of the stuff, but he was not the actual owner of the cartoon. So in 1928, and the start of the year, we would have it so Walt Disney would find out that in this contract there was this loophole where he actually did not own the rights to Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, which was devastating because at that point, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit was bringing in a lot of dough for the company. So because of that, almost every single one of his animators was taken away with Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. I know, tragedy. However, also, we're still in the year 1928. Also in the year, you know what? Let's have it on the screen so people know what year we're talking about. So also in 1928, they would go through and they would have it so during this contracting loophole, most of these people were taken away, but one of the animators stuck with Walt Disney because he did not have a part of that contract because he was actually with Walt at the start of the start of his company. So if you go back in time to the start of the Disney Brothers Cartoon Studios, one of the animators which was there since the start was Ub Iwerks. Now Ub Iwerks, who actually shares a birthday with me, so in 2 days, happy birthday, Ub. Ub Iwerks was a mastermind, and he was actually the person who single-handedly would draw pretty much every single Mickey Mouse cartoon for the first year. So with Ub, along with Roy, with the finances and a few other things, they would go through and they would start to work on a brand new Mickey Mouse cartoon. Now, while they were working on this brand new Mickey Mouse cartoon, because at this point we didn't even know who Mickey Mouse was, he didn't actually have any cartoons at this point. There was a movie that came out, The Jazz Singer, so 1928. There was a movie called The Jazz Singer, which would come out, and The Jazz Singer would be the very first film, not animated film, but very first film to ever have synchronized sound with the thing. Before this, if you go back and watch some old-timey history things about different movie theaters, they would have it so there would be an organist playing, and then they would have it so they would be going along with the music that was supposed to be in the thing, and then the words would appear on screen, and then be like, help me. And that is how movies were created before then. However, with the idea of this synchronized sound, Walt Disney said, haha, I've got a great idea. So here's one of those things that most people will kind of throw this trivia at you about what is the very first Mickey Mouse cartoon. Now, we all know it as Steamboat Willie, but other people will say it was Plane Crazy. Now, the reason they'll say it's Plane Crazy, because Plane Crazy, along with Galloping Gaucho, both of them were released theatrically after the Mickey Mouse cartoon, or after Steamboat Willie. However, both of them were actually created before Steamboat Willie. Those two short cartoons were being created before the synchronized sound thing came out with the Jazz Singer, and they were starting to have test things with the test audiences, but they didn't actually release in theaters. They were limited time for one theater and one theater only. And when the Jazz Singer came out, Walt Disney said, halt! We are not going to do this anymore. And he pulled Plane Crazy and he pulled Galloping Gaucho out of the mix, and he threw Steamboat Willie out there. Now, when he threw Steamboat Willie out there, it became a massive success. Now, one of the things that we also should talk about while we're talking about the 1923 year is not only the creation of Mickey Mouse and the loss of Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, but one of the things that most people always forget about, and it drives me crazy every single November 18th when everyone's saying, happy birthday, Mickey, happy birthday, Mickey, happy birthday, Mickey. I always just want to yell at people, Minnie too. Because Minnie Mouse also shares a birthday with Mickey Mouse in 1928, November 18th, 1928, to be specific. So two icons of the Walt Disney Company were both created, or both debuted, on November 18th, 1928, and both of them technically have the exact same birthday. Okay. Should we continue on 1928? Because I feel like I could keep on going on about 1928. I haven't even looked at the notes that I had pulled up. I think that's good. Yeah, so that was Minnie Mouse's birthday too. So actually, Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse, their first few things, Galloping Gaucho, Plane Crazy, the two of them all starred together. So actually, Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse were just created at the same time. Now, one of the reasons why most people kind of forget about Minnie Mouse's birthday is mainly due to the fact that Mickey was the main commercial success for the company and not really Minnie Mouse. Minnie Mouse was still beloved by all, but she was not the exact same. She wasn't the same icon that Mickey Mouse was at that time. So because of that, it just kind of fell by the wayside, and we kind of forget about Minnie Mouse, or a lot of people forget that Minnie Mouse was actually there as well. Brent was clear about and Horace Horsecollar created before or after Goofy. They were both created before. Actually, if you asked me about 1929, we would get into a lot of history about Clarabelle Cow and Horace Horsecollar. But we'll get to Goofy also as Dippy Dog in 1932. All right, let's move on to our next one, which was 1962. Okay, 1962 was a very, very slow year for the Walt Disney Company. Now, before we kind of go into the idea of 1962, let's first talk about what came out in 1962. In Search of the Castaways, which was a great film. If you've never seen it, I want to say it is found on Disney Plus. I think so. I can't remember. Maybe it's not. It's a Haley Mills film. I know I have it on DVD, but I think it's on Disney Plus as well. It's a great film. I want to say it's the one with when they're going down the mountain. It's like the most like fake special effect you'll ever see, but at the same time, absolutely hilarious. Absolutely love it, and it's a great film altogether. If you've never seen it, make sure you go check it out. So that was the only film that was released back in 1962. The Legend of Lobo also came out, which is just one of the like live action movies that I've seen it. It's not the greatest. It's okay. You check it out if you have time, but if you have the time to watch that or Candleshoe, I suggest going to Candleshoe. So in 1962, to kind of talk about the history of what would happen in the Disney Company leading up to that point, this is where something massive would happen. So prior to this, in 1952, maybe it would have been important for us to go in history, but yeah, I kind of like the random year thing. But that's how my brain works too. Everything's kind of scattered up there. So prior to 1962 and 1952, Walt Disney was given a mechanical bird that was, it would chirp and it would sing and then it would stop. That would be kind of the end of it. Now, back then, Walt Disney wanted to figure out exactly how this bird was created. He gave it to some of his animators / some of his Imagineers. At that point, they weren't called Imagineers, but that's besides the point. So he would give it to them, and they would kind of go through and try to figure out how this thing would work. From it, they were able to figure out one thing, and one thing only at this point, and that was the idea of moving figures, but not really audio animatronics. So at this point, back in 1952, they were able to create things like the Jungle Cruise hippos that would move over when your boat would hit the little trigger. It would have it so it would move. Kind of the same idea, but not the full idea. Now, in 1962, Walt Disney started to have an idea, and this idea was going to be a massive idea. Now, at this point, the Disneyland, or I was going to say the Disney Company, but Disneyland had been around for 7 years. Now, in those 7 years, we started to see more and more things open up. Now, if you look at the history of Disneyland, we're going to go into it as soon as someone out there says 1955 or even 1954. But when you go through the history of Disneyland and what was created starting in 1955, we had so many opening day attractions. It's like mind-boggling how many things opened up with Disneyland back in 1955. And then as the following years would go through, we started to get more and more different attractions coming in. Things like the Mickey Mouse Club, the circus, which was kind of a crazy idea that was very, very short-lived. We had Holidayland, the picnic area. We had the Matterhorn bobsleds come out in 1959, along with the Matterhorn in 1959, and then the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, also 1959. 1959, really big year about the Disney Company. We're going to get to that more, like I said, when people say 1959. However, in 1962, besides the In Search of the Castaways, which was a good movie, and the Lobo movie, which was okay. In addition to those two movies, we started to go back to that idea of the mechanical bird, and Walt started to focus more and more on this idea of this mechanical bird and how this mechanical bird would actually work. So he started going to more and more of his Imagineers and said, we have to figure this out because I have an amazing idea for a great sit-down restaurant. What? A great sit-down restaurant. So at this time, he had this idea of having a bird show where people would have all these birds over them. People would come in, they would sit down, they would have dinner served to them as the birds above them would put on a show. Now, eventually people would start to say, it's a good idea. However, it's a terrible idea because no one wants to be sitting below birds, because if they think they're real birds, they're going to be afraid that the birds are going to be, going to the bathroom into their food. So they said, this is not a good idea, but maybe what you can do is create a show. So in 1962, we had it so not only was Walt starting to work on this idea of a show with the birds that would be a dinner show, eventually he would start to switch in that year and have it so they would have it so all these birds that would go around and sing and dance, maybe not dance, but squawk at each other and have a storyline going on throughout about a 15-20 minute presentation. So in 1962, Walt Disney would go up to the Sherman brothers, Robert and Richard Sherman, who are just absolute Disney legends. He brought them into this room and he said, "Look at these birds." Oh, and they were all kind of just moving around and acting up, and they said, "This is amazing. What is it?" And he goes, "That's what you're here for." And he gave them the task of putting on a brand new show, which would be called the Enchanted Tiki Room. So with that foundation in 1962, the Sherman brothers, along with the Imagineers, would start to focus on what was going to be creating the Enchanted Tiki Room, which would become the very first animatronic show, which would open, ironically, in 1963, our very next year. Yes, we made it. Okay, so in 1963, that was our first really big milestone of the year. So in 1963, we would be introduced to Jose, Pierre, Fritz, and Michael. The four birds that would be in the middle of the Enchanted Tiki Room. Now, when these four would be there, we would have it so it would be the birth of the animatronics. So even though they started to be created back in 1962, they would actually have it so their founding was in 1963. So with this creation in 1963, it also led into what would eventually become 1964. But no one said 1964 yet, so we're not going to go into 1964 until eventually someone says 1964. But with this creation, Walt Disney started to have amazing ideas about what the park could be. And with this new animatronic technology, he decided to have it so in 1963, he would start creating things for the 1964 World's Fair. So in 1963, Walt Disney started to reach out to multiple different brands around the country. Everything from GE, which eventually would say, "Hey, that's a great idea." Pepsi-Cola, which would say, "Hey, that's a great idea." And then a bunch of companies that also say, "That's a terrible idea. We don't want this at all." Walt Disney would bring these people to Disneyland and say, "Hey, look at this brand new show we have featuring these four amazing birds." And of course, we all want to know, well, I wonder what happened to Rosita. And while we're trying to figure out what happened to Rosita, the sponsors and the owners of these different companies said, "I don't know how you're doing this, but we want in." So Walt Disney in 1963 started to go through and get funding from all these major corporations to have it so they would help fund his future projects that would open up in the 1964 World's Fair. In addition to that, while all this other stuff is going on with the parks, we also had it so one of the Walt Disney featured animated films would come out, and that film, of course, would be The Sword in the Stone. Now, in The Sword in the Stone, the animators decided what they wanted to do was they wanted to depict Walt Disney himself, because they figured Walt Disney's kind of a master magician, but they had already kind of used a lot of his mannerisms and stuff in the movie Fantasia, as in Yen said with the Sorcerer's Apprentice. Yen said is Disney spelled backwards, but that's beside the point. They decided to also bring in some of his mannerisms to Merlin as well. Walt Disney was not flattered about either one of them at all. He didn't think it was like the greatest compliment. At the same time, I'm sure he probably was flattered. He didn't want to let these people know that he was flattered about this addition. So in 1963, we would get The Sword in the Stone, but that would not be released until December 25th. It is the only Disney animated film. We also have Soul, which is a Pixar film. But in 1963, Sword in the Stone will be released on Christmas Day, and it was the only Disney film to ever be released on Christmas Day. And then, like I said, we would eventually have Soul, which would be released in the other. Okay, let's go to our next one, which is 1976. Now, in 1976, many different things were going around the world. Now, if you look back at the world in 1976 and you think about Disney, not a lot of people are thinking about what's going on in 1976 with Disney. Now, of course, we would have it so one of the big things that was going on that year would be the bicentennial for America. So in 1976, we also got because we just started talking about it, but we would get our very new parade, Americon Parade, which would feature several different patriotic themes featuring America Now this celebration would go on for quite a few years, and that's kind of besides the point. None of this stuff is actually in my notes now. We're just talking. Um, so at the same time, we got a few brand new movies which would come out. One of them, they don't have it on here, but it would be one of the greatest Disney films of all time, or maybe it was 77. Now that I think about it, might have been 77. I was thinking Candle Shoe came out in 76. We're going to ask Google. What year did Candle Shoe debut? I want to say it was 19.
The release date of Candle Shoe was
1977. I'm a year off. But there was another Jodie Foster film that came out in 1976, which was also released by the Disney company. And it actually started a small, very, very small, brief contract with Disney and Jodie Foster. Jodie Foster, of course, would eventually go on to do things like Silence of the Lambs, not for Disney, but for other studios. But she did actually get a lot of her big start with the Disney company in 1976 in a film called Freaky Friday. If you've never seen Freaky Friday, maybe you've seen the sequel, or maybe you've seen the Disney Channel sequel, or maybe you've seen, maybe not sequels, but remakes. There's been so many different variations of Freaky Friday that have come out throughout the years. However, the first one would be the one starring Jodie Foster as the daughter, and she would switch bodies with her mother after the two of them had a disagreement, and they would start to realize that maybe, just maybe, the two of them are also living difficult lives, even though they're not living the same life. So that was going to be our big thing that would happen in the movie theaters. And then outside of that, in the movie theaters, we would also have something kind of massive, which is Card Walker would take over as CEO. Now, prior to this, we would have it so there were a few people who ran as CEO. The first one, obviously, being, Disney himself. And then in 1971, we had Don Tatum. And then in 1976, we got Don Tate, or Card Walker. I was going to say Don Tatum again. Card Walker. Now, Card Walker would run as a CEO for just a few years until eventually he would be taken down as well. But Card Walker did do a few things. He started to greenlight different projects like Epcot and then Tokyo Disney. But besides that, not a lot of other exciting things happened in 1976, mainly due to the fact that I was thinking 1977 when there was a lot of different things that would come through and become part of the massive Disney history. Okay, if you guys are just joining us, what we are doing is we're going through and we're doing a history of Disney, but we're doing it out of order. So if you guys want to join us, you're going to throw it out a year into the comments below. So far, we've done 1928, 1962, 1963, and 1976. You can ask out any other year besides those 4 years, and from 1923 all the way to 2023, and we'll go through and answer, or not answer, but we'll kind of go through the history of those ones as well. Okay. I'm going to watch on replay, head into Little Mermaid ride. Oh, yeah. All right, 1953. Is the chat now working? You know what? Let me pull up my apps here, because right now it's not showing that anyone's commenting for a long time, which is kind of unlike you guys. You guys are usually talking a lot more than this. So let me just pull this up here and see if maybe it's something on my side that I'm just not seeing it. Maybe not. No, people are just listening intently, hopefully. Hopefully people are listening. Some go like, I'm out of here. Get me away from this guy. Okay, so our next year is 1953. Now, 1953 does have the release of one of my favorite Disney films of all time. So let's start off with that. So in 1953, we got Peter Pan came out. Peter Pan would be one of the most beloved Disney films of all time. However, Walt Disney actually did not like it at all. He did not think it was that great of a film. Actually, at that point, he said it was one of the worst films they had ever released. Throughout the years, Walt Disney did believe that maybe it just was not that good of a film. Now, one of the things that can actually attest to this is a really interesting history that most people don't really know the history to. So let's talk a little bit about the history that happened in 1953 with this film, along with something that was going on completely behind the scenes with Disneyland. So like I said, 1953, we got Peter Pan. Now in Peter Pan, we got so many different classic characters like Peter Pan, Wendy, John, Michael. We got Captain Hook there. And then, of course, we have the one, the only, the lovely Tinkerbell. Oh. Now, show of hands in the chat room. Raise your hand if you love Tinkerbell. Like, if Tinkerbell is one of your top, 10 characters in the Disney company, a lot of people, I feel like, would put her up at the top of one of the most iconic, one of the most classic Disney characters of all time. Right? Right? Show of hands. Anyone? I'm also looking to see if do we have any other Tinkerbell things. I know I've got a few Tinkerbell things here. I just don't know if they're within arm's reach of where I am right now. But a lot of people would also say that Tinkerbell is one of the most classic characters of all time. However, at this point, she wasn't. I mean, obviously her movie had just come out, but Tinkerbell, along with Jiminy Cricket, were really put on a weird mission by the Disney company. Because in addition to 1953 of us having Peter Pan come out, we also had another film, which was The Living Desert, which was one of the true life adventure films. Good film. If you've never seen it, go check it out. It won some Oscars. But that's not what we're talking about. We are talking about a little bit about Disneyland. So in 1953, Walt Disney was behind the scenes, and he was working on this brand new project called Disneyland. Now, with this project of Disneyland, he was currently in works with several different broadcasters. And when I say several different broadcasters, at this point, you literally had CBS, NBC, and NBC, CBS, and ABC were the three main competitor, the main three broadcasters. Now, if you don't really remember a time before cable, I kind of remember a time before cable became massive. But at that time, so many people were watching the same show. So when you watch something like the broadcast of the Disneyland opening event, there was 90 million people who watched that live. 90 million people were watching that day back in July 17th, 1955. And to kind of put into perspective, at that point, that was over half the population of the United States was tuned in watching that show. So that was mainly due to the fact that there was not a lot of television channels. So in 1953, a lot of people weren't really watching TV, or a lot of people were watching TV, but a lot of the big movie studios did not really like the idea of TV. They thought it was going to be the thing that was going to kill movies. They were completely wrong, but they thought it was going to completely kill movies, and they wanted to have it so movies would stay alive. And so a lot of the big networks would say, no, we don't want to have anything to do with TV. However, Walt Disney was kind of a man ahead of his time, and he was like, you know what? I can actually use television to my advantage. So what I can do is I can actually have it so I partner up with one of these television studios and have it so we create a brand new show broadcasting Disneyland. It's going to give promotion to me. It's going to give them some much needed revenue. And in turn, we will also have it so maybe these people will give me money. So he went to CBS because CBS was like a prestigious thing. And they said no. CBS, no. So then he went to the last option that he had, which was ABC. ABC said, okay, what we'll do for you, this is back in 1953, what we'll do for you is we'll give you about $4 million. $4 million is a lot of money. So in turn of having it so they could create this Disneyland show, they would also have a lot of funding for Disneyland. At the same time, they're going through and trying to figure out how to promote Disneyland because Disneyland at this point was just kind of a back burner idea. They didn't really know what they were doing with it completely yet. Walt knew what he wanted, but a lot of people had no idea, and there was only a few Imagineers that were completely on board. Remember, Disneyland would actually not start being built until 1954. However, with this deal, he told all these different people, if you want to have it so we go forward with this idea of having Disneyland and having this Disneyland television series, we need to have it so we bring in some iconic characters to do the show. What? No, that's not how it happened. They said we need to bring in some characters for the show. But Walt was kind of skeptical about Disneyland himself. He wasn't sure if it was going to be a huge hit or a huge flop. But at that point, the studio was starting to pick up enough steam that a lot of people knew the Disney company. And even if Disneyland failed, there was still a chance the Disney company would still come on top in the long run with the movies. So maybe they could just kind of abandon the idea of having this theme park and they would just focus solely on the movies once again. So what Walt decided to do was he did not want to have one of his main stars associated with Disneyland because he was kind of saying, you know what, if Disneyland flops, the last thing I want to do is have people associate Disneyland with Mickey Mouse. So what we're going to do is we're going to take two characters, which are known but not completely lovable, and have it so we take these two characters and put them in the limelight. So when we talk about Disneyland, these are the two characters people will think of when they watch the television series. The characters were Jiminy Cricket from Pinocchio back in 1940, and then also Tinkerbell, which had just come out that year. So Tinkerbell only started to gain popularity mainly due to the fact that they were afraid that Disneyland was going to be a massive flop. And with this idea of having it so it could possibly be a massive flop, we might as well put Tinkerbell on TV because most people don't really like Tinkerbell. So if it flops, oh well, it's just Tinkerbell. No one really cares about her. But because of the success of Disneyland, Tinkerbell would eventually become a massive, massive, massive character in the long run. Now, at the same time, with the creation of Disneyland, I haven't even looked at my notes forever. I'm sure I'm missing like a cajillion things about that year. Yeah, we got the ABC deal. Yeah. And then at this time, Walt Disney Incorporated is renamed WED Enterprises. And when it would become WED Enterprises, WED standing for Walter Elias Disney, WED also standing for, that's why we have the periods after the Wednesday show. In case when you guys are new here and you're like, why does he have it so it's capital W-E-D? It's for Walter Elias Disney. But that is completely besides the point. That's why we do the show on Wednesdays. Legit, that is the reason why we do it on Wednesdays, because of Walter Elias Disney. So he would eventually have it so he would switch over and have WED Enterprises, and with WED Enterprises we become WED, which would become eventually the Imagineering aspect of the company. Of course, at this point we didn't have things like Imagineers was created, but at this point we also had it so Walt Disney started to buy the land for Disneyland. So originally he wanted to have an idea of a Mickey Mouse theme park, which would be found on the actual studio lot. And then he decided that what he needed was a brand new area. And when he created this brand new area, he decided to have it so they would create Disneyland down in Southern California over in Anaheim, because most people didn't really know about Anaheim at that point. So Anaheim was kind of the perfect location because it was far enough away that it would be a destination, but at the same time, it was close enough to enough of the expressways that were starting to be built around the area that it would be hopefully popular enough for the Disney company. Of course, Anaheim became a massive thing because of Disneyland, but that's completely besides the point. But this was the point when Walt Disney started to build the land, and then at the same time, he started to hire more and more of his staff to become part of the crew that would actually help create Disneyland. Okay, I need a water after that one because that was 1953 was a good year. That was a really good year. 1953. Who knew? Okay, let's move on to our next one. If you are just joining us, we are going through and answering your, or not answering your things. You guys are throwing years into the comments below, and with those years, we are figuring out exactly which year we're going to be talking about. So we're just kind of going through and did he buy the land in California under different names like he did in Florida? So kind of similarly, what he did was he did buy the land, but it was more direct. Like it was not enough people really knew the Disney name at that point, so he could buy enough land under his name. But at the same time, he was able to buy other land. He had other people in the company buy the land for him, so it wasn't completely, unheard of. At that time, there was also orange trees everywhere, hence why it's called Orange County. There was orange trees everywhere, and with those orange trees, a lot of people didn't really live on the land. There was a whole lot of nothing. Actually, when Disneyland construction started, there was still someone who was living on the property of Disneyland. Like Walt had purchased the land, and the person said, okay, just give us till like the end of the year to move out. So in 1954, in Disneyland, technically someone actually lived there, and they moved out as the time was going on. So yeah, he bought the land. It wasn't as secretive as it was in Florida. Like it was still secretive, but it wasn't as secretive as it was in Florida. Okay, 1971. I was gonna say not a lot happened in 19. There was a mess that happened in 1971. Okay, So obviously in October of 1971, we got our big thing that's going to happen, which is going to be the opening of Walt Disney World. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about a few other things. So just 5 years prior to 1971, we had some tragedy happen in the Disney company, with that tragedy being the loss of Walt Disney himself. So when Walt Disney was passed away, a lot of people didn't really know what direction to take in the Disney company. Obviously, Roy Disney, his big brother, was still there, and Roy Disney wanted to finish a lot of the different projects that Walt was working on. One of the big ones being the Walt Disney World Resort. However, that's not going to be the one that we're really going to talk about at the start here, because while Roy was working on that, he he gave permission to the studio people, saying, "Oh wait, you guys just kind of figure out what's going to work best for the studio and kind of go from there." Now, one of the things that they decided to do was the year prior, they had it so there was a film about cats come out, because mainly due to the fact that Walt Disney never allowed them to really have cats be the main characters unless it was like a tiger or like Bagheera or a Shere Khan or whatnot. Different animals like that, but not like a house cat. Walt Disney was not a big house cat fan. And so because of that, you would often find dogs as the main characters, but not really cats. So in 1970, we got the Aristocats, mainly due to the fact that Walt Disney just kind of never greenlit a cat project. But with this, they weren't really sure what to do with the studio. And they said, you know what, in 1971, what we're going to do is we are going to go back on top and be the biggest thing in Hollywood. We're going to have a movie that was just as good as one that we had 7 years ago. So in 1971, they released a brand new film that was almost the exact same, not same plot, but same concept as Mary Poppins. And of course, that would be Bedknobs and Broomsticks. They took the entire idea of, let's have it so it's set in England, because that was a huge success with Mary Poppins. We'll even have David Tomlinson, who was in Mary Poppins, be one of the main characters in this film as well. And then let's get Angela Lansbury there and have it so it is a musical that is not just set in the human world, but also let's throw a little fantasy in there and have it so we go into an animated world as well. Bedknobs and Broomsticks was mildly successful. It was not the most successful film of all time, but it did not reach the level of Mary Poppins that they wanted it to reach. Now, a lot of people who were working at the studios were kind of running out of ideas because they didn't really have that leadership with Walt Disney. So in the 1970s and to most of the 1980s, you would see that there's a lot of kind of flops that Disney had in the studio department. Now, on the other side of things, we also did have in 1971 some massive things going on in the parks department. The parks department. It sounds like we're in a, I don't know, like a town. The parks department today. So in 1971, we had it so construction continues on Walt Disney World here, like literally like a mile and a half down the road there. We have it so Walt Disney World would actually open up with the Magic Kingdom. Now, we've gone through Walt Disney World's opening so many times in the past, but it doesn't hurt for a refresher. Let's do a quick refresher. We're not going to go into this for too long, but at the same time, we might go into it very long because I think, I like to talk a lot. So in 1971, the construction for Walt Disney World was going on for quite a few years, and Roy Disney wanted to have it so it was purchased or finished by 1971, October 1st, 1971 to be specific. So on October 1st, 1971, Walt Disney World would open up with two different hotels, which would be the Contemporary along with the Polynesian Resort. And then we would also have it so all the famous lands that you can find today were also there then. Yet Main Street USA, which had everything from a working barbershop down to the trolley cars and old-timey vehicles of Walt Disney World Railroad that would take you all the way around. And then going down to the main part of the park, you would also have the hub. In the center of the hub, we would not have the partner statue that would not debut until 1995, but that's besides the point. We're not really talking about that right now. In the center of the park, we would have Cinderella Castle. Cinderella Castle, of course, taking the name of Cinderella from the 1950 classic film Cinderella. Who knew? However, there was a mistake at that point. Not really a mistake, but at that point when the park opened up, we did have a restaurant inside, but it was called King Stephen's Banquet Hall. King Stephen being the father of Aurora from the 1959 film Sleeping Beauty and not Cinderella. This name change would not happen until about 1998 when Cinderella's Royal Table would open up instead of King Stephen's Banquet Hall. Over in the back part of the park in Fantasyland, we had so many amazing attractions. Let's try to name them all. We had the Skyway from Fantasyland to Tomorrowland. We had It's a Small World, Peter Pan's Flight, which would open up 2 days later. It would open up on October 3rd, 1971, instead of October 1st, 1971. We had the Mickey Mouse Review, Prince Charming's Royal Golden Carousel. I was going to say Regal, but that's the name now. And then we would also have Snow White's Scary Adventure, Dumbo with the Flying Elephant, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and the Mad Tea Party. In addition to those ones over there, over on the other section of the park, and the other section, as if that's like there's only 2 sections. Over in Tomorrowland, we would have, that's right, the Skyway from Tomorrowland to Fantasyland. It's a 2-way street. And then we would also have things like Mission to Flight to the Moon. I'm drawing the biggest blank right now on some of the names here. Flight to the Moon, Autopia, but it wasn't Autopia. The Speedway, Tomorrowland Speedway, but at the same time it had the Grand Prix, Tomorrowland Grand Prix Raceway. And then there was only one other attraction that was open up. I'm trying to look at my 1971 park map that I have on the wall, but I'm drawing a huge blank on everything. Eventually, we would have other things like People Mover, Carousel of Progress, and so many other attractions come into the future. But at that point, Tomorrowland was just kind of a barren wasteland. Like, it was really, there's not a lot there. Over in Liberty Square has actually been the most unchanged land of them all. We had the Liberty Bell Riverboat, the Haunted Mansion, and the Hall of Presidents, again with the Liberty Bell Riverboat opening up one day after the park first opened up. And then in Frontierland, we got a brand new attraction called the Country Bear Jamboree, becoming the very first attraction that would open up in Walt Disney World before eventually opening up in Disneyland, and eventually it would actually close in Disneyland too. However, it did originally make its debut in Walt Disney World. In addition to that, we had the Davy Crockett's Canoes, Mike Fink's Riverboats. Tom Sawyer Island was not a thing yet, but off in the distance, we had promise of a future, but we didn't really have anything like Big Thunder Mountain Railroad would not be opening up for another 11 years, and Splash Mountain would not be opening up for another 21, or 22. So a lot of things in Frontierland were just kind of barren as well. We also had the Frontier Shooting Arcade over there as well. And then over in Adventureland, we had the Swiss Family Treehouse. We had the Enchanted Tiki Room, or at that point it was called the Tropical Serenade. And then we also had the Jungle Cruise as well. There was no Pirates of the Caribbean, and there was no Aladdin's Flying Carpets. So all these different things were opening up at that point. 50 days after the park would open up, we would also get another resort, which would be the Fort Wilderness Campground. And that was about it. There was not a lot else that would happen in 1971. Oh, wait, no. Tragedy strikes again for the Disney company. Later on that year, just shortly after Walt Disney World's opening, we lose another Disney icon, which would be Roy O. Disney. Roy O. Disney, being Walt Disney's brother, would pass away shortly after the opening of Walt Disney World. And when this happens, we would have Don Tatum taking over as CEO of the company now that Roy was no longer with us. And eventually, we would get Card Walker in 1976, which we talked about already. So 1971, a lot of different things would happen, but unfortunately, some tragedy as well. Roy really loved his brother. Let's talk about Roy and his brother real quick. So we're talking about the history of the Disney company with the 100 years of Disney magic. Now, a lot of people always talk about Walt Disney, but it's so important that we talk about Roy Disney as well, because if it was not for Roy Disney, none of this would be possible. Like, I know it's called Walt Disney World, but I know all of us love Walt Disney. I know a lot of us always think, hey, if it wasn't for Walt, blah, 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 blah. That's true. A lot of stuff would not be around because if Walt was not around, because Walt was this creative genius in this family. However, also at the same time, if it was not for Roy, none of this financial stuff would have been planned out, and we never actually would have had any of these dreams come true. So if it was not for Roy, Walt would just be nothing. I mean, essentially, he would be nothing. Now, one of my favorite things that is at Magic Kingdom is when you walk into Town Square, the central area right before you actually go down Main Street, USA, there is a statue of Roy Disney along with Minnie Mouse there holding hands. Don't be like my friend who I used to work with, who had a picture of her sitting on the bench with Roy and Minnie, and she posted pictures on her Facebook, and this was before Instagram, and it had a picture of Roy, her, and Minnie, and she said, Walt, heart, 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 and I was like, Roy, ha, ha, ha. She thought, she was like, oh, I take a picture with Walt every single time I go to Disney or every time I go to Magic Kingdom. I was like, that's Roy Disney. Walt is at the other end of the park. But anyways, that's besides the point. That's a completely side story that I just went into a tyrant over. So in 19, or I'm sorry, when you walk through the park, there is that statue, and it's Roy Disney along with Minnie Mouse, and it's called Sharing the Magic. And the basic concept behind Sharing the Magic is if it was not for Roy Disney and Minnie Mouse, there would be no Walt and Mickey. Like, if it was not for Roy and Minnie in the background taking the sidelines for their loved ones, the people they love more than anything, if it was not for Roy giving up all of his love for his brother and Minnie giving up all of her love for Mickey, we would not have Walt and Mickey. So in reality, the true stars are Roy and Minnie. And that's actually why you see Roy and Minnie before you actually see Walt and Mickey, is because if it was not for those two, the other two that you would see really would not have anything that they accomplished in the long run. Okay, we're going to do one more year. I've got one more year that's here, 1975. However, if you would like to have another year done, I have not checked the number of YouTube subscribers. Someone threw another year down. We will possibly do another year if we went up in subscribers. We started off at 2,697. Yeah, 2,697. So if we've gone up to 2,698, we will go into another year, and then another year, and then another year, and then possibly another year. So keep throwing your numbers out there, and keep getting people to subscribe. So if no one's subscribing, then unfortunately, this might be our last one, but we'll see. Okay, so 1975. This is going to be a short one too, because not a lot happened in 1975. So in 1975, wait a minute. Which one came first? I always forget. Oh, no, that's the first one. Okay. In 1975, let's because I just made that noise, which probably to you means nothing. To me, it meant nothing either, but it did remind me of a specific attraction that would open up in Tomorrowland at Magic Kingdom. So in 1975, we got a brand new attraction. Wait a minute, we got multiple brand new attractions. So in 1975, we opened up the very first roller coaster at the Walt Disney World Resort, which would be Space Mountain. Now, a lot of people will always have the great debate about which one's better, Space Mountain in Disneyland or Space Mountain in Walt Disney World. Personally, I think the one at Walt Disney World is better, and I don't think of that because it's the original. I just think it is more unpredictable than the Disneyland one, which goes left, right, 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 left turn, right, 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 left turn, right, right. It drives me crazy. Every time I go to Disneyland, I'm like, this is the most predictable ride ever. And one of my friends is like, Space Mountain's the best. And I told him that. And halfway through the ride, he's like, I hate you. I no longer love this ride. So yeah, hopefully if you go on the ride, I have ruined it for you as well. I like Disneyland or Disney World's better because it's unpredictable. I know the ride inside and out, but I feel like it's more unpredictable because it's right turn, left turn, right turn, left turn. You know, like you don't really know which turn you're going to get on. Even if you've been on it several times before, it's kind of unpredictable about what turn you're going to have or when you're going to drop and all the other stuff. Well, Disneyland's is just left, right, 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 right. It drives me crazy every time I go on it. So in 1975, we got that. In addition to that, we also got a brand new attraction in Walt Disney World. Actually, it had been over in Disneyland, but it was replaced, or not replaced, but it came over to Walt Disney World as well, which would be the People Mover. The Tomorrowland Transit Authority, which would become one of my favorite attractions of all time. I love it. I love it so much. It is just one of the greatest attractions of all time. So we got a few different attractions that would open up in Walt Disney World. Over in Disneyland, we also had a few different things that started to happening. Things like America Sings were going on like crazy. However, America Sings was also starting to make way for the celebration of the bicentennial, which we had, like I said, over in Disneyland with 1976 with America on Parade. So with America Sings, we would go through and have it so it would be all these different characters singing in the spot where there's a great big beautiful tomorrow. The Carousel of Progress was at originally over in Disneyland, but at the same time it was coming over here to Walt Disney World. So we had so many different attractions that were coming to Walt Disney World, and some of them were opening up at Disneyland first, but not all of them. Like I said, Space Mountain would eventually come over to Disneyland 2 years later in 1977. So while all this stuff was going on, we also got a brand new movie in the theaters. Now, at this point, the animation department started to kind of fall by the wayside, so we weren't getting an animated film every year. Actually, we wouldn't start getting an animated film every year until the mid-1980s, when Michael Eisner would come in and pretty much save the day. But instead, we had it so there was some live-action movies coming out every year, but not a whole lot. Because, like I said, at this point, they were kind of struggling with what to actually do with the Walt Disney Company. They knew that they wanted to do stuff. They just weren't sure exactly which stuff to do. So in 1975, we got a live action film called Escape from Witch Mountain, which told the story about two siblings who were essentially aliens and trying to escape from this location and try to eventually return to their own spaceship because people were after them because they were aliens. Eventually, it would release another film a few years later, Return to Witch Mountain, and then eventually we would get Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in another one back in the 2000s as well. And that concludes 1975. Okay, let's see if we got any new subscribers. If we got new subscribers, we will go to another year. If we didn't, unfortunately, this might be the end for tonight. Okay, let's see here. Sadly, that is the end, my friends. 2,697, but that's not bad. That's not bad at all. All right, before we wrap up tonight, let me know in the comments, what do you think? Did you guys enjoy? Do you enjoy the scatterbrained way of doing it, or would it make more sense if we were like going through the years? I feel like it's more of a challenge to me, which I kind of enjoy. I enjoy the that's how my brain works though. My brain's like, oh, let's pull out this random fact about this. I forgot that I didn't have a lot of like this stuff written down about like I didn't have anything about what opened up in 1975 except for Escape from Witch Mountain. So I had to remember what it was. So far we've gone through 1928, 1962, 63, 76, 55. No, that's 53. 71 and 75. So not bad. We've gone through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years out of 100. So we're almost done. So what we'll do is sometime in the near future, maybe next week, maybe not next week. It all kind of comes down to we'll go through and do another episode like this. And what I want to do is have it so we're going to kind of spread them out a little bit, but at the same time, I want to have it so we hit all 100 years at some point or another, leading up to October 16th, which is the actual 100-year anniversary of the Walt Disney Company. Oh, thank you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Brian. Happy birthday to you. Thank you so much. I'm not excited for my birthday. I don't want to get old. I hate birthday. I really didn't. I like getting a cake. And I like getting some presents, and I like going to Magic Kingdom. But I hate the idea of getting older. I never want to grow up. If you guys have been watching this long enough, you probably were able to pick that up at some point or another. That I'm not a fan of getting older. I just want to stay young forever. Okay, but on that note, I would like to remind you guys once again that that tonight's episode is sponsored by It's All About the Mouse Travel. Make sure you stop by It's All About the Mouse Travel.com for all of your Disney travel needs. All their services are absolutely positively 100% free. So make sure you book with them for your next Disney vacation. I'd like to thank everyone out there for joining us once again this week. Please keep on spreading the word about the Wednesday show and From a Screen Theme and my YouTube channel. So make sure if you know anyone, we're 303 people away from hitting that 3,000 subscribers. If every single person out there sends 30 people over, we'll hit it. Uh, and actually, that's all. Like, we just need 30 people from each one of you. So, for the people who are watching right now, send 30 people over. You have 2 days to get 30 subscribers each from me. Actually, I had funny story before we go. My nephew was telling me the other day about how he was really sad that I was going to be leaving when I was up there, and I told him that just to go to daycare the next day and tell all of his friends to tell their parents to subscribe. And then the next day I saw him and I said, "Did you tell your friends?" He goes, "No, I forgot." And then I asked if he told his teacher the joke I told him to tell her, and he didn't tell her that either. And then the next time I saw him, I asked if he told the joke, and he said, "No, I forgot." So if I don't hit 300 or 3,000 subscribers by Friday, my nephew is part of the problem. But thank you everyone for joining us once again. Keep spreading the word. As always, remember that anything can happen if you let it. Until next time, have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye. Goodbye now. Goodbye. Bye-bye now. Goodbye. Goodbye now. Are, are they are they gone? Are they gone? Oh, good. My cheeks are just killing me. I just can't stand this kind of pressure.